The black belt called out a black janitor and asked him to spar just for fun. What happened next? The whole martial arts gym went dead silent. Hey you. Yeah, you cleaning over there. How about a quick demo? Derek Mitchell yelled from the center of the mat, his black belt shining hard under the gym's bright fluorescent lights. Bet you've never seen a real fight in your life, huh? James Washington paused his mopping and slowly looked up. He was 42 years old and had only been working as a janitor at that gym for 3 weeks, always coming in late after the students were gone. But that Thursday night, the advanced class ran way past schedule. I don't want to bother you, Sensei, James said calmly, going back to scrubbing a stubborn stain. Just finishing up so you can get back to training. Derek burst out laughing, loud and dramatic, his voice echoing across the gym. Yo, everybody look at this. Dude's scared to even step on the mat. The 8 students there laughed awkwardly, some clearly uncomfortable. What Derek had no clue about was that James had spent the last 20 years trying to forget who he really was. 20 years since he walked away from the ring after an accident that changed his life forever. 20 years hiding a secret not even his teenage daughter knew. Come on, man, Derek said, walking closer with that cocky grin he used to bully beginners. Just a little demo. I bet you don't even know a basic guard. Show my students the difference between someone who trains and someone who just cleans. James felt that familiar tightness in his chest, like a sleeping muscle waking up after years of silence. His eyes met Derek's, and for just a second, something passed between them that made Derek step back without even realizing it. Just educational, Derek said quickly, trying to cover the sudden shake in his voice. Nothing serious. Just showing respect for the art. James set the bucket down and stood up slowly. His movements were smooth, way too smooth for someone who supposedly had never stepped on a tatami mat. Around the gym, students stopped training. Everyone felt it. Something was about to go down. All right, James finally said, calm as glassy water before a storm. But when this is over, you're gonna apologize to them for turning the mat into a circus. Derek laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. Apologize? Nah, man. You'll be apologizing to the floor when you hit it. What nobody there knew was that James Washington was once James Silent Storm Washington, a 5-time world MMA champion. He retired at his peak after an accident killed his best friend and training partner. Since then, he swore he'd never fight again. But some promises don't survive disrespect. If you're enjoying this story of justice and comeback energy, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see how a moment of prejudice turns into the most humiliating lesson of Derek Mitchell's life. Derek adjusted his black belt dramatically, loving the attention. Everybody gather up. You're about to see why hierarchy matters in martial arts. The 8 students formed a half circle. Some were hyped. Others were clearly uneasy. A young Asian woman with her hair tied back whispered something to her classmate, who shook his head. Look here, Derek continued, waving his hands like a showman. This is what happens when someone doesn't understand there are places meant for certain people. Elite gyms aren't for, well, you know. James felt that same tight pull in his chest. He'd heard those words before, decades ago, when people said fighters who looked like him couldn't be champions. The difference now was he knew how to turn anger into something colder, sharper. Sensei Derek, the young woman said softly. Maybe we should continue normal training. It's late. Sarah-chan, are you questioning my teaching? Derek snapped. Sit down and watch. You'll learn more in 5 minutes than a month of regular training. James noticed how he used her full name. Power move and intimidation rolled into one. He also recognized the fear in her eyes. The same fear he saw 20 years ago after the accident that killed Tony Hammer Rodriguez. Tony died because of him. That's what James believed. A sparring session, punches thrown too hard, pressure from racist comments in the crowd. Tony fell, hit his head wrong, and never woke up. Officially an accident. But James knew better. So, Janitor, Derek sneered. Show us a basic guard. Or is that too much for someone who only knows how to push a mop? Laughter bounced around the gym. James didn't move. His eyes closed for a second, and he was back in that Vegas ring, hearing the same garbage before the tragedy that wrecked his life. What's wrong? Derek taunted, circling him. You scared? Or are you just gonna stand there like a lamppost, same way you stand with that squeegee all day? That's when Derek made his first big mistake. He shoved James lightly in the shoulder. Not hard, but loaded with arrogance. James didn't budge. His feet were planted like tree roots. Derek felt like he'd pushed a brick wall. His smile cracked. Interesting, James said quietly. Been a minute since someone tried provoking me like that. Something shifted in the room. Not anger. Not threats. Just deadly calm. Derek, missing every warning sign, doubled down. Y'all hear him? He thinks this is interesting. Let's show him the difference between thinking and knowing. Every insult was waking something in James. Not rage. Something worse. A crystal clear memory of who he really was. Sarah watched closely. The way James breathed, the barely visible muscle tension, it reminded her of Predator documentaries. Calm before impact. Last chance, buddy, Derek said, annoyed. Either you do the demo, or I call security. And yeah, you lose your job too. James opened his eyes slowly. When he looked at Derek, it felt like a dragon waking up. All right, James said low and steady. But after this, you explain to your students why you turned learning into humiliation. Derek laughed nervously. Explain? You'll be explaining things from the floor. What Derek didn't know was James had spent 20 years mastering emotional control, turning his old destructive rage into something precise and lethal. Every insult just sharpened it. Derek straightened up, loving the silence. The students formed a full circle. You're about to see a lesson worth 6 months of training, Derek announced. The difference between real fighters and those who just clean the floor. James stood still. His breathing changed. His eyes closed, and he wasn't in Denver anymore. He was back in Las Vegas, 22 years ago. Look at that little black guy, someone had shouted. He won't last 3 rounds. James had won in the second round, but it cost him everything. So, Janitor, Derek mocked again. Show us how not to do a guard. That's when Sarah Chin couldn't stay quiet. A 22-year-old purple belt and sports psychology grad student, she'd been researching discrimination in sports. This was real and ugly. Sensei Derek, she said firmly. Why is humiliating someone necessary? Silence hit hard. Derek turned slowly, annoyed. Who's teaching here? You are, she said. But that doesn't include racial humiliation. Students shifted nervously. No one had ever challenged him. Racial? Derek laughed fake. This is about respect and knowing your place. James opened his eyes. Sarah's courage reminded him of his sister Kesha. Same fire. Same refusal to stay silent. Kesha died at 17 from a stray bullet during a police confrontation. James was in Japan when he heard. Another loss. Another reason he disappeared. Sarah, Derek said coldly. If you don't like my methods, find another gym. My tuition's paid, she replied. And respect matters. That's when James smiled. Not weak. Not nervous. Calculated. For 20 years, guilt weighed on him. But seeing Sarah stand up reminded him who he was. Derek, James said calmly. She's right. This isn't martial arts. It's ego. Derek spun around, furious. You don't even know what a dojo is. James stepped forward. His posture changed instantly. Perfect stance. Perfect balance. I know exactly what a dojo is, James said. And this stopped being one a long time ago. A chill ran through Derek. His instincts screamed danger, but pride shut them up. Enough talk, Derek growled, taking his stance. I'll teach you respect. Sarah watched, anxious but fascinated. The janitor moved like the master she studied. Efficient, calm, deadly. James closed his eyes for one last second and let 22 years of muscle memory come back. Every fight, every lesson, every victory. When he opened them again, Derek found himself staring straight into the eyes of Silent Storm Washington, the 5-time world mixed martial arts champion. Last chance to apologize, James said calmly, offering mercy to her students, and to turn this place back into an actual learning space. Derek laughed, but it came out shaky, forced, fake as hell. Apologize? Man, you'll be begging for forgiveness when you're flat on the floor. What Derek didn't realize was that James had already clocked every single one of his technical flaws. The high guard that left his body wide open. The habit of stepping back with his right leg first. The way his shoulder made tiny movements that gave away every punch before it even landed. 22 years away from the ring hadn't wiped out decades of sharp, elite-level analysis. Sarah noticed the other students instinctively backing away, like animals sensing a storm about to hit. The whole vibe in the room shifted, like the air crackling right before lightning strikes. When everyone laughed at Derek's latest trash talk, something unexpected showed up on James's face. Not anger. Not revenge. Just the calm focus of a man who had finally found a reason to break a 20-year vow of silence. Some people in the room started to feel it. Something big was about to go down, even if they couldn't fully explain what they were seeing. Derek dropped into his favorite fighting stance, the same one he'd used for years to scare beginners. Feet shoulder-width apart, fists tight at chest level, weight leaning forward. The classic stance of someone trained in safe gyms against predictable opponents. James stayed still for a few seconds, just watching. His eyes moved over Derek from head to toe, automatically logging every detail. The high guard exposing the ribs. The shaky base throwing off balance. The stiff shoulders screaming every move before it even started. Still waiting, Derek sneered, bouncing slightly on his feet. Were you going to stand there like a damn lamppost? That's when James did what nobody expected. He moved. Nothing flashy, just a quiet shift of his feet, a lower center of gravity, shoulders relaxing into a perfectly level line. But to anyone who knew the game, the change was instant and scary as hell. Sarah Chin felt a chill run straight down her spine. After 2 years studying sports biomechanics, she'd broken down hours of footage from elite fighters. What she just saw was the switch from a normal man to a straight-up predator. Subtle. Deadly. Interesting, Derek muttered, his confidence cracking for the first time. Something about the way James now owned the space triggered every survival instinct he had. James stepped forward, and Derek backed up without thinking. It was so raw, so automatic, that several students caught it. A black belt retreating from a janitor. The power balance in the room flipped completely. Problem? James asked softly, his voice carrying quiet authority that shut everyone up instantly. Derek felt his face heat up. His image was getting questioned in front of his own students. He couldn't back down now, even though every part of him was screaming to stop and apologize. No problem, Derek said, forcing a grin. Just checking out your posture. Did you learn that off YouTube or something? The joke bombed. Nobody laughed. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Actually, James said evenly, I learned it at a place called the Las Vegas National Gym. Maybe you've heard of it. Derek frowned. The name rang a bell, but he couldn't place it. Las Vegas? What? Some weekend boot camp. Sarah Chun quietly pulled out her phone and typed Las Vegas National Gym Martial Arts. What she saw made her stomach drop. This wasn't just any gym. It was where the greatest MMA champions of the last 3 decades trained. Derek, James continued, still calm. Last chance. Apologize to Sarah for questioning her right to speak. Apologize to your students for turning this place into a clown show. And most of all, apologize to yourself for becoming exactly the kind of person martial arts is supposed to stop you from becoming. The offer of mercy hung in the air. Derek could have chosen humility. He could have admitted he crossed the line. He could have saved what little dignity he had left. Instead, he swung. Derek's first punch was textbook perfect. Fast, clean jab, straight out of the manuals. The kind that worked on almost everyone he'd ever sparred with. James wasn't almost everyone. The movement was so smooth, so fast, half the room couldn't even process it. James simply wasn't where the punch was aimed. His body slid aside like water around stone. Suddenly Derek was off balance, arm reaching into nothing. Nice try, James said quietly, already reset and perfectly balanced. Clean technique, decent speed, but you gave it away with your right shoulder. Derek spun around, panicking, trying to find him. How the hell did he move like that? Beginner's luck, he muttered, mostly to himself. The second attack came fast. Jab. Straight. Hook. His favorite combo, the one he used to end sparring sessions and impress newbies. Again, nothing. This time Sarah tracked it. James dipped just enough for the jab to miss by inches. Leaned back impossibly so the straight hit air. Then stepped back just enough for the hook to miss his chin by millimeters. Interesting combo, James said, still breathing easy. Works great on people who stand still, but you're leaving your left side wide open. Derek was sweating now. This wasn't normal. He'd thrown thousands of punches in his life, and now he couldn't touch a guy who supposedly never fought. Stop dancing and fight, Derek yelled, throwing an even wilder attack. That's when James decided enough was enough. Derek's third attack, desperate punches and kicks, missed again. But this time, when Derek reset, James was suddenly closer. Way closer. How? Derek whispered, realizing he'd lost all sense of distance. Derek, James said calmly, now within arm's reach. You want to know the difference between someone who learned to fight in gyms and someone who learned in pro rings? Before Derek could answer, James did something that wrecked everyone's understanding of reality. No force. No aggression. He simply placed his right palm on Derek's chest. Derek flew. Not pushed. Not knocked down. Launched, like he got hit by an invisible wave. His feet left the ground. He traveled nearly 2 meters and slammed onto his back, the sound making everyone gasp. The silence afterward was total. Derek lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what just happened. No pain. Just overwhelming power from someone operating on a whole different level. That's impossible, Derek muttered, trying to sit up. Sarah Chun forgot how to breathe. In 2 years of training, she'd never seen power used so clean, so controlled. No rage. No brutality. Just precision, something she'd only read about in legends. Actually, James said calmly, offering a hand. It's simple once you understand leverage, timing, and energy transfer. Stuff I learned over a 22-year pro career. Derek ignored the hand and stood on his own, legs shaking. 22-year pro career in what? Sarah answered softly. You don't know who he is, do you? Everyone turned to her. She held up her phone. On the screen were articles, photos, videos confirming what she already knew. James Washington, she read, also known as Silent Storm, 5-time world MMA champion, one of the greatest technical fighters ever, retired undefeated after 22 years, following an accident that killed his training partner. The words hit the room like a bomb. Derek went pale. He'd challenged a living legend. 5-time world champion. Derek stuttered, all arrogance gone. James nodded. I retired at 29. Since then, I've worked whatever jobs I could get. Cleaning, maintenance. Simple work, simple life. No spotlight. No ego. The change in Derek was brutal to watch. The arrogance vanished, replaced by shame. I didn't know, he whispered. If I had known, if you had known, would you have respected me? James cut in gently. Or would you still have humiliated someone else? Another janitor? Another worker without titles to protect them? That question hit harder than any strike. Sarah stepped forward. Sensei Derek, for 2 years I trained here out of respect. But what I saw today wasn't teaching. It was bullying dressed up as discipline. Other students nodded, murmuring agreement. James, Derek said finally, voice heavy. I sincerely apologize. To you. To Sarah. To everyone. James nodded. Apology accepted, but that's just step 1. What matters is what you do next. Derek looked around at his students. I'll change, he said. It'll take time, but I'll change. Then Sarah surprised everyone. Mr. Washington, would you consider teaching again? Because real strength comes with responsibility. James smiled for real this time. Maybe, but not to teach fighting. To teach respect. Because belts don't earn respect, character does. Months later, the gym was transformed. James Washington wasn't just the janitor anymore. He was an instructor. Derek lost half his students after the video went viral. His reputation was cooked. Sensei James, Sarah said after class. Thank you for showing us that real strength doesn't need flexing. James smiled. Never judge people by their job or appearance. Everyone's carrying a story. Derek taught at a smaller gym now, humbled by public shame. He learned arrogance always costs something. Sometimes justice comes quietly, like a storm that changes everything without making noise. James proved real revenge isn't destruction, it's character. If this story hit you, subscribe for more stories where humiliation turns into triumph.